Buongiorno studenti. Today I'm going to address why scusa is not correct when you want to say excuse me or pardon me in Italian in a formal way. For example, if you bump into a stranger when you are in Italy. Now, I know that many students get confused when I say that the formal way of saying excuse me in Italian is scusi and not scusa. Students think that since the verb is scusare, let me type this for you so you can see this. Since the verb is scusare, which means to excuse or it's used to say pardon me, then when we conjugate it, we have this. Io scuso, tu scusi, lui, lei scusa. So, excuse me formal should use the lei form. So it should be lei scusa, right? But the problem is that no, this is not right in this specific case because in Italian, in this specific instance, when you want to say pardon me or excuse me in a formal way, we actually say scusi with an I. But how is this possible? That's because in Italian, we actually have two different verb forms. The first one is called indicativo presente, and that's the one that we just saw and the one that you probably already know. So let's call this with its name, which is indicativo presente. Io scuso, tu scusi, lui, lei scusa. But then we have another verb form, which is called imperativo. And I'm going to add it here. So let's take a little bit more space. Imperativo is a different verb form and it has a different conjugation. So I'm going to show you that now. For the verb scusare, here's the conjugation of imperativo. Scuso, so it's io, but we just say scuso. Scusa, so for tu, the correct form is scusa. And for lui and lei, the correct form is scusi. So they do look very, very similar. Indicativo presente and imperativo do look very similar. But if you look closely, you will notice that the endings for tu and lei are actually switched. In indicativo presente, it's tu scusi and lui, lei scusa. But in imperativo, it's tu scusa and lui, lei scusi. So many students use indicativo instead of imperativo, not knowing the difference and not knowing it that in this very instance, so when saying pardon me or excuse me, you actually need to use imperativo, not indicativo. So that's the reason for the mistake. So the key here is that you need to know when to use one or when to use the other, when to use indicativo presente and when to use imperativo. So here's my super simple rule. If you're stating a fact, you need to use indicativo presente. If you're giving a command or telling someone what to do, then you need to use imperativo. That's your rule. So now let me show you this rule in action with some example sentences. Let's suppose we want to say, you wait for the train. When you have a sentence like this, you have to ask yourself, is this a statement of a fact, or is this I'm giving a command with this sentence? In this instance, if you say you wait for the train, you're just stating a fact. You're just describing a situation. You wait for the train. So since we're stating a fact, we need to use indicativo, in this case, presente. So how do we say you wait for the train? We say tu aspetti il treno. I'm just stating that you're waiting for the train. Now, what happens if instead of stating a fact, I'm just giving you a command or I'm telling you what to do? For example, if I say wait, in this instance, I'm giving you a command. I'm telling you what to do. So I need to switch to imperativo. So how will that look like? If I want to say you wait, that will be Aspetta, aspetta. So can you see the difference? If I'm stating a fact, I'm saying I'm using indicativo presente, so the ending is I, tu aspetti. But if I'm giving you a command, then I'm switching to imperativo. Therefore, the ending changes because I'm saying aspetta, and that's the correct form for tu, so the informal you. And notice that we usually don't say the subject pronoun, so tu, when giving a command. We just say aspetta. Okay, let's see this with another example with the verb scusare. Let's suppose you want to say you, with formal you excuse his behavior. Is this a statement or is this a command? This is a statement. Therefore, we will use indicativo presente. So if you want to say you, formal, excuse his behavior, in Italian that will be lei scusa il suo comportamento. This is a statement. But what happens if I bump into someone that's a stranger? I need to use the formal you, and so I want to say you, formal you, excuse me, or pardon me. Then I will need to switch to imperativo because that's a situation where we use command form. I'm telling them, excuse me. So in this instance, we will say scusi, because that's correct form for formal you for imperativo. And again, can you see that the endings are switched, are different? So if we want to statement something, a fact for third person singular or for formal you, that's going to be lei scusa. But if we want to give a command, that will be lei scusi. Now, if confusing scusa and scusi is something that has happened to you too, please let me know in the comments because I always love to hear about your experience with Italian. Now, what I want you to remember is this. This topic can be very, very tricky, but the first step to master it and to get clear is to understand what you're doing. When you're saying something, if you're stating a fact, then you need to use indicativo. If you're telling someone what to do or telling someone to do something, then you need to use imperativo. By the way, if you want to really assimilate this rule so that you can sound more correct when speaking Italian, you may benefit from the PDF that I prepared for this video. In the PDF, you will find a helpful recap of the rule that we have learned today, plus more examples like the ones I showed you. If you want to use the PDF, you can immediately download it. You can find the link in the description below this video, and it's free. Now, something else I want to share with you. This pattern that I showed you today doesn't only work with scusi or aspetti, which now you know are the correct formal way of saying excuse me or pardon me or wait in Italian. This pattern works for all are verbs. So all verbs that end in are in the infinitive form. So whenever you learn a verb that ends in are, A-R-E, let me show you some examples of those. So I'm talking about verbs like mangiare or parlare. So mangiare, to eat, parlare, to speak. Ascoltare, to listen. Guardare, to watch. Entrare, to enter. Provare, to try. What all these verbs have in common is that they are all are verbs. They all end in are. For all these verbs, the same specific pattern that I showed you today applies. So what you learned today, you can reuse these with all these verbs. And by the way, you will find examples with all these verbs in the PDF I prepared for you. So that's the point. The key point here today is that you need to remember that for statements in Italian, we use indicativo presente, but for commands, when telling someone what to do, we use a different verb forms, which is called imperativo. If you distinguish between those of them, you will be right, you will be correct. And that's all for today. I will see you in the next video. Ciao da Valentina.